Our final contributor of the evening, who is Mike Unwin. Now, he's another Bradt author. He is the author of the Guide to Swaziland. He lived in Swaziland for, was it 8 years, Mike? 5 years. We were actually there at the same time, but I didn't have the fortune, sadly, to bump into him then, but it's very nice to bump into him this evening. He's also the author of The Wildlife of Southern Africa. He loves to tell people about the glories of wildlife tourism. But this evening, he is going to tell us a tale that is definitely wild, but in a slightly different way. Mike.
Thank you, Kate. And thanks for coming, everyone, and thanks especially to Hilary and to Bradt for squeezing my little story into this. We've all seen it now, haven't we? I don't have to advertise. Fantastic.
They're all going to buy it.
Gripping anthology, I should call it. More than a book. Yes, my story, it's called Something to Declare. I'm afraid it's not really a story of heroism and daring do. It's more a tale of foolishness and embarrassment, which in my years of travel is I've found to be the more typical experience. But I'll set the scene quickly. It took place in 1989 on a train from Zimbabwe. I was living and teaching in Bulawayo at the time, from Zimbabwe to Gaborone in Botswana, across the border. I was on a mission. I was with two friends, and the mission was to get a car. Cars were very hard to come by in Zimbabwe at that time, but Botswana, so we were told, had them. So, it's past midnight. My fellow passengers are sprawled across the hard bench seats of the carriage. Some folded over luggage, others squash-faced against windows. The pulse of snoring ebbs and flows above the rhythmic clatter of the rails. Our train rumbles on into the night, eating up the dark miles of thorn scrub. I'm not asleep, though, and neither is Louise. Her eyes glint in the carriage's one weak overhead light. "Do it now," she hisses. I get to my feet. Nobody appears to be watching. The aisle is an obstacle course. I maneuver over legs and baggage, steadying myself to avoid grabbing a sleeping face. A judder prompts one snorer to grunt and shift, stopping me dead. But the carriage dozes on. Reaching its end, I pass into an interim corridor, stepping over a film reel blur of tracks beneath the gap at my feet. I find myself standing between the closed doors of two toilets. Mine is the one to the left. I grasp the handle. But wait. Suppose they know what I've done. Suppose they're lying in ambush. One more step and the night will explode into lights, yells, whistles. They'll have me red-handed. No, it's just paranoia. There's no sign of life. Besides, can't a man answer a call of nature? I ease down the window to let in a face slap of cold air, and then, steeling myself to the task in hand, turn the handle and slip inside. It's dark. The light fitting dangles bulbless, but the moonlight is enough to work by. Lowering the toilet lid as noiselessly as I can without fingering too much of its unpleasant underside, I climb up on top. And there, high on the outer wall, is the hatch, just as I'd left it 3 hours earlier. But there's a problem. It's shut tight. I run my fingers around the frame, searching for a fingertip grip, and they alight on a small metal keyhole. Locked. My heart sinks as I now recall the click when I closed it earlier. I thump on the hatch door. The futile thuds resound around the cubicle and no doubt down the corridor. So, just to explain this hatch, if you imagine inside a Zimbabwean train toilet, which I know might be taxing you slightly, but there's a slot high up on the wall into which the guard inserts the destination sign that you read from the platform, which in my case said Gaborone in Botswana. Why was I trying to break into it? Because it was full of cash, and it was full of cash because I put the cash there. The reason being that in order to buy a car, I needed cash. No credit cards then, and Zimbabwe had very tight restrictions on exporting currency. So we'd got together all the money we could, and I'd I secreted that money about my person, which means essentially I'd stuffed it in my pants. And all was fine, seemed like a great plan until we reached the border. And at the border, I'm not a habitual smuggler, and I was extremely nervous. And when I saw all the guards get on at the far end of the train and start methodically making their way up the carriages, I panicked. This is what happened. A knot of fear tightened in my stomach. What had I been thinking? Of course they'd search me. We were the only white faces. Everyone knew young Mzungus on public transport could only be up to no good, smuggling ganja, probably. Besides, I break into a sweat at the sight of a traffic warden. I'd surely give myself away. They'd already been tipped off. They were coming for me. Stay here, I muttered to the others, and ignoring their looks of alarm, began shouldering my way down the aisle. The toilets, I could hide there. The door on the right was locked, but the one on the left gave way, and I stumbled inside, closing it behind me and breathing hard. Safe. Who was I kidding? Not safe. They'd search the toilets. Of course they would. And anyway, I'd have to get my passport stamped, or they wouldn't let me over the border. Heart pounding, I cast around my squalid little cell for a solution. Flush the money down the bowl, cut it up and swallow it. Then I spied the hatch. Eureka. With no time to lose, I dropped my jeans and started emptying my underwear. In seconds flat, I'd stuffed the cash into the hatch and closed it, flushed the chain, always a sign of innocence, and was returning to my seat. Anyway, you can guess what happens. The guards worked their way down the train. They came to us. They were extremely friendly, extremely polite. They didn't search us. It was a false alarm. No problem. We'd got away with it. And we passed the border, and the train rumbled on into the night and the darkness, and people fell asleep, and I had to return to the toilet to retrieve my money. And that takes us back to where the story started. So quickly end it. So now I'm staring at the locked hatch, racked with doubt. Is my money in there or not? Have they left it as bait? Perhaps as the guard crouched in the toilet opposite, chuckling unpleasantly and hefting a baton in his meaty fists. What happens to currency smugglers in a Zimbabwe jail? I creep back to break the bad news. What do you mean you didn't get it? Hisses Louise. I daren't meet her eye, but leave her down my backpack and start fishing through the outer pockets. Bird book, insect spray, playing cards, Swiss Army knife. Bingo. Clutching my trusty weapon, I return to the loo. I'd love to claim that I whip open the hatch before you can say unexplained death in police custody. But it takes 10 minutes of swearing and gouging and chiseling before, bleeding from a gashed thumb, I've done enough damage for the door to concede defeat and flop open. And there's my cash, all bundled up in plastic bands, just how I left it. I fish out the grubby wads and stuff them back into my pants. Then, heart in mouth, I open the door and step out into the corridor. There's nobody there. Nobody to bludgeon me senseless and clap me in irons and drag me away. Just the reassuring rhythm of the train on the tracks and its snoring passengers. I'm drained, shaking with relief and adrenaline, but elated. I strut back down the carriage, barging through legs and luggage with all the swagger of a man who knows he carries in his capacious underpants a shiny second-hand Mazda 323. Or at least the cash equivalent. I'm a travel-hardened criminal, and Africa is my oyster.